What you're about to watch is part 2 of yet another embalmer stepping forward. If you have not watched part 1, I will link part 1 in the video description below. And you can either pause this video, watch part 1, and then come back to this video, or you can watch this video first and then go back to part 1. Either way, the information is there. This video is not going to be entertaining. It is going to be heartbreaking, but it is 100% factual. And it's information that needs to be said. So without further ado, I give you part 2. Bro, you really need to go to the doctor. And of course, he said to me, you and I both know what's going to happen if I do that. And I do. I mean, your career is probably done. So
you're going to get grounded.
So I understand his reasoning behind what he's saying, but I told him by the same token, what good is your career if you're no longer here to be there for your wife and your kids? The scary thing is, John, that it's becoming more and more prevalent where I'm having first officers confide in me and tell me that, oh yeah, I have chest pains. I've just learned to live with it. I've probably got that myocarditis thing or whatever, and it is what it is. I've just accepted it. I think we're heading down a very, very dangerous road. My wife and I, as a matter of fact, I haven't even told you this yet. We came back from a cruise about 2 weeks ago, and we brought back a little souvenir from our cruise with us that was called the beer flu. And this was the first time that my wife and I have gotten it. Keep in mind, I'm not giving medical advice in any way, shape, or form. I got to throw that disclaimer out there. But my wife and I decided to beef up on our vitamin D and our zinc and some vitamin C. And, we were sick and we laid in bed and we rested and we slept and we took Tylenol for our fever. And then magically, just like every other sickness, we got better and our body made antibodies and it fought off the virus. And now, magically, our heads have not exploded and we're still alive. I know it's hard to believe.
Exactly. I would concur. I mean, and I almost have to get comical about it a little bit. It's not funny, but, I'm exposed to things on a daily basis as a funeral director embalmer. And, I started back a few years back, and I still do it to this day, a certain regimen and protocol of over-the-counter medications that I take daily, and my family takes daily. And we've been thankful and blessed, and we've been overall healthy. And again, if we get a little sinus issues, then we use our sinus regimen, and we rest and we drink lots of fluids, and we use Tylenol and ibuprofen alternatively, and we're good in a few days. So this whole concept of the fear that's out there, I don't understand it. I have another case of a young girl in her late 20s, early 30s, completely fine, and sitting on the commode, explaining to her family that all of a sudden she doesn't feel good and is ruled the cause of death is a spontaneous pulmonary embolism, which is essentially a blood clot to the lungs. Late
Right.
20s, early 30s.
That's just so tragic.
Again, only correlation is because of the place of employment that she was employed. She was required to drink some juice, per se.
I don't really understand. I mean, I guess part of me does understand, but it still blows my mind why this is still continuing, why it's not being investigated more, why more people are not standing up and demanding answers. And that's the reason that I do this, John, is because I am tired of watching people that I work with, people that I know, and people that I love decide to take an eternal dirt nap prematurely.
It's because we are dispensable. We live in a disposable generation. You know, if a printer goes out, you just throw it away and buy a new one. We don't fix things. We don't have a value of human lives. And I have to choose what I say carefully as well. But at what point are we gonna stand up and put a stop to this ourselves and say something isn't right? We've never seen people die at the rate unexplained that they are in the last 18 to 24 months.
It's terrifying, and it seems to be getting worse rather than better.
I don't think, just from what I see in the prep room, I don't think we've reached the peak yet. I think this is going to, unfortunately, become the new norm until we get to a status where we have more folks not taking juice than we do folks that have taken juice. And I think the problem is now we're saying, well, that was good that you had 1 cup. Now you need to have 2 cups and 3 cups and 4 cups and 5 cups. And my question is, if it's so effective, this juice is so great per se, why do you have to keep having more of it? It makes no sense to me. And so, you know, there was a specific age range that juice was recommended for. And so you take that age range, add 18 to 24 months to it, and that's the predominant age of cases that are laying on our tables each and every week.
Wow. Now, John, you're from a smaller town, correct?
I am, yes.
Okay, so in a smaller town, a lot of people know each other, and it seems to be a little bit more personable. Have you seen excess death rates locally where you're from?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so even in the small town, in the small area of the state that you're in, you're seeing it there.
Yes.
Wow. And I should probably add that even though I know you've chosen to remain anonymous, and this is more for the people who are viewing this video, I can assure you that John, as we're calling him, is 100% legit, because John is a very close friend of a very close friend of mine. And I can tell you that what you're getting today is not only coming from a man who says who he says he is, but also, I understand you're also a man of faith, John, and you have no ulterior motives behind this.
No, I don't gain anything other than to fulfill the golden rule of love God and love people. And in my opinion, what has transpired in our society globally is definitely not loving God, and it's not loving people. To me, if I don't begin to speak out, and hopefully one day soon I won't have to remain anonymous, circumstances will be able to change. But for me, speaking out is no different than trying to stop someone from taking their own life, or you know, not speeding, what law enforcement does. I mean, to me, this is no different, because I don't think people really understand the gravity of the situation and what is transpiring. It's not so much the immediate effect. It's the after effects. It's the 18 to 24, the 5 to 10. we haven't reached that 5 to 10 year point yet. How do we know what's going to transpire? All I can say is that I'm not a doctor. You know, I've studied a lot of stuff, and I have a good grasp of things. All I can report is what I'm physically seeing before my eyes, case in and case out. You know, hearing my wife share with me that 3 of her classmates, in their mid-30s are now sterile and will never be able to have children again, because the only correlation that we can point our finger to is the fact that they all partook of the same juice.
Let me ask you this, John. I'm going to ask you to speculate a little bit here for a minute.
Sure.
You did say you don't feel like we're at the peak yet, and I tend to agree with you. I don't think we are either. My question to you is, over the next 6 months, year, 2 years, even 5 years from now, how bad do you think it can still get?
I think that depends. I think that depends on how long we continue to buy into the lies of Big Brother, and I think that depends on how many people continue to receive juice. What my speculation would be is that I think our age of living is going to significantly decrease. The majority of the persons that are coming across my table now, it used to be rare to see someone in their late 50s, early 60s. I mean, most of the time it was, late 70s, early 80s, 90s years old folks that were passing away. Now, the majority is those folks in their 50s to early 60s. And I think that's going to become the new norm, because that's that age bracket of juice. I mean, so the question is, the peak, what happens when you have an entire generational section that's gone?
Yeah, that's scary to think about. Are you still seeing the same number of people that are passing away in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, or is it you're saying the majority of them are 50s and 60s now?
Yeah, I think used to, it was a rarity, it was a shock, it was a surprise to have what we would consider, if you think of the length of life, nobody thinks, well, hey, I'm going to live 50, 60 years and I'm going to die. I mean, most people think of death, they think of, if you think of an older person, you think of someone in their 80s, right? I mean, that used to be kind of the sweet spot, 80s and 90s. Nowadays, it's rare to get someone. I mean, if we do a case and, they're 75, 78, 81, something in that nature, that's a shock. Whereas used to, that was the norm, and the younger folks were the shock. Unfortunately, we've gotten to where the number of deaths at a younger age are rising, and that's surprising us. I look for, by the end of this calendar year, for the number of younger deaths to be more than the number of older deaths, and that is unnatural.
That is not only unnatural, that's unfathomable.
Absolutely.
That just blows my mind. Do you have anything else that you would like to share? I know we've been on for almost about 30 minutes now, John. Do you have anything else that stands out in your head that you would like people to know about?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would say is that, a lot of folks watching this video and listening to this, Triple P, I know you've interviewed another embalmer and you've done a lot of research and know information on this thing. So somebody watching this might say, well, crap, what do I do? I've drank juice. And my advice to them would be, number one, don't take any more. We can't change the past of what you have done, but we can change the future and potentially have an effect on your outcome. These vitamin D3, I can just tell you my regimen, this isn't any secret. It was published by a doctor from Israel back in 2020, and I started it, and I subscribe to it. I take it every day pretty much. I take quercetin. I take vitamin D. I take vitamin C. And I take zinc, along with some other regular, Centrum men's, because I'm starting to hit that age where they say you should take men's vitamins. So whatever that means. I would say start changing those daily things to help compensate the potential things that might be changing within your body. And then obviously, as a man of faith, I'm going to say pray about it. God can intervene in situations that some people would seem unintervenable. And so my encouragement to folks would be, if you get the prickly pears on the back of your neck stand up in a situation, that's your God-given discernment and your body saying something's not right. And if something doesn't pass what I call the smell test, if something smells a little funny, then it's probably a little funny. And so if you're hesitant about things, my encouragement would be do your research. Research both sides. Research from all walks of life and see what people are telling you. Here's the deal, and this is going to be as close to the line as I'm going to try to push tonight, Triple P. But think about it this way. I started off this conversation with saying, generally speaking, what we do in our vocation is not publicly talked about. You probably don't go down to your local coffee shop and, people are talking about, boy, you should have seen the guy on my table last night.
Right.
Because of the respect and the reverence we have for the deceased, that we do this because we truly care about families. When you're a locally owned operation, if people think they're going into the funeral service in a local community, they're going to be locally owned and they're going to make lots of money, you're not. We do this because we care for families. It's an opportunity to walk one of the toughest times in life with families and to make that process and that path that they're unfortunately having to take a little bit easier. So we're not doing this for money, and we respect and revere them, so we're not going to openly talk about what we do and what we see in the prep room. Don't you think that if I was going to give you or sell or push or whatever terminology you want some juice, if I had a product that I wanted you to take and buy, and not know fully the outcome, don't you think that I would have it to where it affects and the outcomes are not going to be publicly talked about? I think that's a little odd that what we're seeing is post-death. Nobody talks about that. So I think that for folks that are a little bit leery and saying, oh, well, I don't understand all this, and I'm not sure that I'm ready to buy into all this, it's awful odd that the effects of this oftentimes are not seen until post-death, and that's a vocation and an area of life that we simply don't talk about. So just maybe the effects were never meant to be seen or talked about.
Sometimes some of the most interesting phone conversations happen after I turn the camera off. And this is something that we probably should have had in the interview, and John told me this after the interview was over, and I feel it's important enough to include it, so I'm going to. John has told me that the chemical companies are now working on new chemicals to help break down these white fibrous, for lack of a better word, clots that are happening in the embalming process. So apparently this problem has become prevalent enough that it has doubled the time that it takes to embalm a body. And the embalmers are complaining because they're not producing the same amount of volume that they used to in the allotted time. So the chemical companies are now hard at work to produce something that is going to break down what no other chemicals have been able to break down up to this point. Well, John, I'd really like to thank you very much for coming on and sharing your story and sharing your experience with us. And I know that it's been a difficult conversation because we have to use certain words to not spark off the YouTube algorithm. I think that the message is very clear, and again, we're not medical professionals, but everyone out there needs to use a little bit of common sense, do your own research, and make the decisions that are best for you and your family.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, John. I'm sure we'll chat again more in the future, and I really appreciate you coming on, sir.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. God bless you.